Namaskar. Welcome to Rising Bharat. I hope you've all had breakfast. If you haven't, we have the South Asian platter for you. We are calling this session the South Asian Platter, Menu for Growth. And I'll start with the events of the past week. Donald Trump announced his tariffs. Countries across the world got into a huddle. We saw members of the European Union come together and call for a unified response. We saw a similar demand from ASEAN. But we saw no such activity or effort in South Asia. And it did not come as a surprise to most observers, because most would agree that the South Asian experiment is not going anywhere. There are too many divisions, too many rivalries, too much suspicion. But they say desperate times call for desperate measures, and I believe the Trump trade war is one such moment. So can it spur the revival of the South Asian experiment? That's what we'll discuss. Joining me are two voices who represent the future of this region from countries that are punching well above their weight on the global stage. From Sri Lanka, we have Namal Rajapaksa, lawyer, footballer, parliamentarian, and a leader who's actively shaping the political and economic revival of his country. From the Maldives, we have Mariya Didi, a former defense minister and a trailblazer in security and governance. It's very good to have both of you here. Good morning. Mariya Didi, I'll start with you. South Asia has the population, the potential, and the proximity. And this is something that you and I have probably discussed for, almost a decade now. Why are we still talking about untapped growth? What is holding us back as a region?
Why are we?
What is holding us back as a region? Why are we still talking about untapped growth in South Asia?
I didn't quite hear you.
Why are we talking about untapped growth in South Asia?
I think it is a very misconceived concept nowadays. We see the youth here. We saw youthful ministers talk, and the place is becoming very different. It's very vibrant, magnetic. A lot of people in other countries see our part of the world as poverty and chaos, but it's not the case. Once you visit, you see how brilliant the people are, how hardworking people are, how committed they are to their country and trying to bring up and use the resources that we have in our part of the world to the maximum.
Namal Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Modi was in Sri Lanka last week, and he promised Colombo all sorts of support in dealing with the Trump tariffs. Do you think this is a strategy that the rest of the region should also follow? Because New Delhi's equation with the White House under the current Prime Minister is very good. Why not leverage it as a group?
No, I think, Palki, on one side, it's the global trade is changing now. So the traditional or WTO, people are moving out of WTO, and the countries are more concentrating on regional cooperation and government-to-government cooperation. And we must understand that on one side. And on the other hand, I think with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Sri Lanka, there are a lot of things that Sri Lanka and India can work together, especially in regional cooperation. And I think it's more of the best interest for each individual country that all leaders are looking at. And I'm sure moving forward, it doesn't matter whether all what matters is now is what sort of cooperation that you build among your region. So I think there's a lot of potential, and especially for a region that we were more concentrating, or I would say we were more stuck in global context. And we were following more of global orders than looking at the regional partners. And today, India has become one of the largest economies in the world and growing superpower in the world. And I'm sure the regional countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, all of us, can benefit from that if we go on the right path and on right contracts.
What is the right path for Sri Lanka? Your country has seen a tough couple of years with the economic crisis and political unrest and external pressures. Do you think Colombo and the policymakers have learned the lessons?
No, I think so, Palki. I think at the same time, we must also, as governments in our country, we must implement and execute what has to be done at that given time. So what we saw in the past couple of years, because we purely ignored certain development projects, based on political reasons. For example, Sampur was supposed to be started in 2014-15, and similar many other projects that were delayed, like Umayyah from the Iranian funding. And as a result, in 2022, we faced an energy crisis that converted later on into a financial crisis. So I think this is the time that the region should get together, and Indian Ocean countries has to get together and build new partnership on trade, because what has happened in Washington, will not affect Sri Lanka. Not only it will affect directly to Sri Lankan apparel or the exports, but also the maritime industry in Sri Lanka. As you know, Sri Lanka is heavily depending on trade, and we are heavily depending on logistics as well at the same time. So this is something that we need to work together with countries like India and rest of the partners to see how we can work new alliances and build new partnership within the region.
You mentioned maritime trade. Mariya Didi, the Maldives sits in the middle of one of the busiest sea lanes in the world. And for you, your growth is interlinked with your security. How can Male ensure that its geography does not turn it into a battleground for big powers? Can you even ensure that?
We have always relied on our friends, our neighbors, to help us police our vast territory. We are 99.78% water, our territory is. And the sea lanes of communication, as you say, about 40% of the world trade passes through our water. Those going from north to south, through the Middle East, to your country, and to China and other places in the East as well. So we've had a lot of work done with you all. It is imperative that we work together, share our resources, build trust and confidence, work together, have many exercises also together, our armed forces and yours and Sri Lanka as well. We've had trilateral exercises. It's important to share resources, share information, share knowledge, and be together and see us as one region in the Indian Ocean, because the wave that beats on the south coast of India and Sri Lanka beats on our shores as well. So we are very much together in this, and we should work together to make sure that we have a free, open, value-based, rules-based system in the Indian Ocean.
Namal Rajapaksa, when we talk about recovery and growth, all of us need investments. We need to work together with different players. And in today's world, we also need to ensure that this investment is not weaponized or is not used against your country. China, we know, is building infrastructure. India is putting in the money. Who do you trust more now as a partner?
Well, I think it's the best interest for Sri Lanka. I mean, what I look at is, what we should look at is that what can give, which investment can give you the best return for people of Sri Lanka, rather than being rather than looking at it in a very country-specific manner. But I believe it's all depend on the existing governments and the political setup in Sri Lanka, how you manage it. Because investors can come and invest, but at the end of the day, the countries must have a consistency of policies to make sure that the benefits is given back, trickle down it back to your own people. So I think India, there was one point where there were a lot of Chinese investment coming into Sri Lanka. Obviously, at that time we reached out to India, but India wasn't in a very strong position 20, 30 years ago to invest like what they are doing now in the global market. So China has done a lot of investments, and if you look at last couple of years, last 5 to 10 years, the biggest investor in Sri Lanka is India. And yesterday, the Adani Group has launched their port in Colombo. And the 20% of tourists that comes to Sri Lanka comes from India. And we do trade somewhere around $5 billion annually. So it all depends on how you look at it and how the government of Sri Lanka projects it and make use of it.
Mariya Didi, China has never been traditionally part of South Asia, but now they have significant stakes politically and economically, even militarily. They're sending what they call research vessels, what many others call spy ships, and making moves in this region. Do you think that when leaders like President Muizu, their embrace of China gives Beijing a foothold in the region, and do you think that's a mistake?
I think our foreign policy is very confused at the moment. You see him visiting China, then he comes to India, and he talks of India, he talks about Maldives' first policy, but which country is not first for themselves? You know, it's stating the obvious. But if you come to really look at how we have been together from the beginning, you know, India, as I always say, is our 911 call. You're just one step away from coming to help us whenever we have any sort of difficulty as well. And your Prime Minister Modi's neighborhood first policy. And also sometimes when we have been very childish, being mature and being like an elder sister in sometimes very difficult situation where you rise above and then see more than what is there in the social media activist sort of thing. I think our countries have maintained that relationship, the people-to-people relationship that we have always had. And only the other day, 2nd April, you have announced that you would be exporting also many food items which you have a worldwide ban on, helping us, the sea aggregate, the whatever for our development projects that is needed. So you've always been like an elder sister to us, thinking of us as people, you know, who really are together. And our region, you know, Sri Lanka, India, and Maldives have always shared that connection between the people. So,
do you think the India Out campaign still casts a shadow on the relationship, or are we past that phase?
I think, you know, there was a point where the people of Maldives, they got confused with all these new social media and things like this. But I think it's not at a people level. You know, we have always come to India for medical treatment, so many other things. So I think it is just some political thing that was going on just to not concentrate on local politics where they have really seen it as in difficult circumstances to take the mind away from local issues and put something somewhere else. But I think that's no more there. And I'm glad to say that I see a lot of Indian visitors coming to Maldives now. Even yesterday when I arrived on the plane, almost the plane was full with visitors from India as well. So I'm sure we will rise above it and we will always have that close relationship we have with each other.
Namal Rajapaksa, you're young, you're ambitious, you represent a young generation of politicians who want to do new things. I know that there was a time when you were guiding a football team in Kashmir. You've taken up projects that traditional politicians do not typically do. And yet, is it harder to talk about reform when your name is linked to a political dynasty?
Well, I mean, it's how you project yourself and how you face it, because it's going to be always challenging. Politics is not an easy profession to be in, and circumstances changes. And I think as politicians and as political parties, we should reform around it. So it will be challenging, but it's all about how you face it and understand in the global context as well, because politics is no more concentrated on your own constituency or only to your own country, because a lot depending on global trade and global businesses as well, and geopolitics. Because at the end of the day, the national security, national economy all depend on sustainable growth.
Right. We have 5 minutes left. So since we're calling it the South Asian platter, let's try and spice it up with a rapid-fire question. Namal Rajapaksa, starting with you.
Okay.
One word to describe South Asia today.
Well, it's a paradise. It's a paradise, South Asia.
Paradise? Okay.
So if you use it properly, if you project it properly, it can be the superpower in the future.
Mariya, Didi, India or China, who's the better long-term partner?
Vibrant, upcoming, some magnetic, drawing people together.
India or China, who's a better partner? Better, reliable long-term partner?
Naturally India, because we are in the Indian Ocean, we share our... we are neighbors, and you know, if being a lawyer, the worst kind of dispute you can have is with your neighbor.
Yeah.
You know. So,
Well said. This is rapid fire, so we'll dwell on that later. Namal, tourism, tech or trade, your country's best bet for growth?
So I think tech and tourism.
Tech? Tech, okay. Mariya Didi, a South Asian leader you admire outside your own country?
President Modi, Prime Minister Modi, sorry. He's brought your country up to like the global stage. So many things have happened since. Yeah. And also from our point of view, the neighborhood first policy, where he has always believed that together with India, we all rise together and stay together.
Namal, cricket diplomacy or climate diplomacy, what works?
Definitely cricket.
Definitely cricket. Mariya Didi, one thing your country does better than any other in the region?
Tourism, hospitality.
Namal, a regional dish you think deserves global fame? A regional dish that you think deserves global fame?
Well, in Sri Lanka, there is a dish called pol sambal. So I think that deserves a lot of fame.
If South Asia were a restaurant, what would be on the menu? Chaos or collaboration?
Collaboration.
And finally, Namal, in one sentence, what does South Asia need more of right now?
Well, cooperation, partnership.
Are we up for it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, on that note, I think we can wrap this conversation. Thank you very much for being such a fabulous audience, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.